Anyway, so welcome to... This was going to be the bonus podcast, but everyone asked such good questions that we're going to make this public. So this is nobody's secret, but it's not a secret anymore.
Sorry, not sorry.
We're never sorry about that.
I'm sorry a lot.
I'm sorry about most of my life.
So we had...
Pivots to next topic.
We had several audience questions come in, and they start light and get heavy pretty quick, so just get ready for that.
I appreciate all these questions, first of all.
They're great questions.
We actually, are getting more into serious topics. Fun, it's fun to have fun, but we're here... I'm just realizing no one's talking about the shit we're talking about.
We're serious.
They're starting to, but what I'm realizing is that we may have some sort of impact? Question mark?
That maybe, but I also think writing these articles for Into has been eye-opening too, of the extent to which no one has critically thought about the history of queer people in wrestling before, and I am learning that it is a fraught history and people are interested in investigating it.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad that we can bring that conversation forward. But before we do, Julie asked, she said, a few weeks ago, my husband, also a wrestling fan, had a dream that we went to Costco with Ring of Honor commentator Ian Riccaboni. Is that his name?
It's probably Riccaboni.
Anyway, and he bought all the aloe water. It is unclear if he is the commentator or the husband, but someone there bought all the aloe water that they had.
Ate every brand. Not just one brand, all of it.
What do you think this dream means?
As an avowed Freudian, I have to say there's not enough information to answer that question.
I'm going to say that it doesn't really mean anything, because I don't think anything means anything. Maybe your husband went to bed particularly thirsty.
I think he was probably thirsty. There's some hydration issues involved there, and also, he probably needs more male friends.
Well, we answered that question.
That was an easy one. Bobby says, I don't know if you've already answered this, but how did you get into wrestling in the first place? Once you got into the sport, what kept you coming back?
Short answer, yes, we've answered this.
Slightly longer answer, we started watching because Accident Report made us. Because he's been watching since childhood.
He's been.
She's already had hers.
She's already done had hers.
And what kept us coming back is that we started making this show, and you people were ridiculous enough to watch it, so now we have to keep doing it.
That's not entirely true. You would actually, long before we did the show, when I threw pay-per-view parties, you would both show up.
That is true. It was fun to hang around with friends and talk about gay wrestling. I didn't realize that was a job opportunity.
Reluctantly, you guys kept inviting me, but I thought, I was like, I'm gonna make fun of this so hard, and they seem really serious about wrestling, and I'm like, come to find out, that's just what it is.
You just make fun of it.
You just make fun of it.
You watch it.
I didn't realize, because I come from the Midwest, where people still think that this is, or back in the day when I was watching it, as a kid, it was real to some people. And so I was like, I always knew it wasn't, real-ish.
I'm going to transition to some things that are real.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone, brace yourselves. We're going to
it's okay.
We're done with that one?
We're going to the third
is this
question.
A question about childhood trauma or something?
No, this is a question about how... So, drag and...
Who's this question from?
This is a question from Heather.
Heather!
Hi, Heather.
Hi, Heather.
And she's talking about how drag and gender are both expanding in terms of their reach and the vocabulary we have for them, and how we, our understanding of both those terms is growing. Do we think we will ever be post-drag as a result of this?
I think we already are.
I think drag is always post-drag. And that's really heady, and I just came up with that off the top of my head, but drag is... It's when you okay, it's already ahead of its time, because what you're seeing in the public eye, especially right now with Drag Race, is not necessarily all of drag.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with. I think that we are past the idea of drag being cisgender men dressing up as cisgender women.
Right.
Yes.
I think that the idea of performance regarding gender stereotypes or performance that brings those kind of power dynamics into question
Right.
isn't necessarily ever going to be passed.
Go ahead, sorry.
And I don't know if that's what we will like, if our definition of drag will evolve to encompass that. But that's sort of, like, my feeling is that drag is now used as a way of, like, playing with gender, and it's a...
If you're asking that drag, will there ever be a time where drag is not needed? No. Because parody will always be needed. And drag essentially is a parody of...
Gender.
And that's just going to grow.
I think, I mean, you know, the stupid grad school answer to your question is it depends on what your definition of drag is.
And you should really question what your definition of drag is.
Right. And in a way, I said we already are post-drag in the sense that, like you said, if the dictionary definition of drag, and I wrote an article on Nylon about this, is when a man dresses as a woman. In that sense, we are literally past that.
We're so far past it. We're past it.
I hadn't thought about the aspect of your contribution to the question of is there a time where drag will no longer be needed in the sense of being post-drag, after drag. To that, I would agree with you and say, no, of course not, because gender, unfortunately or fortunately or unfortunately, depending on who you ask, will always exist.
And also, I think I also think of drag in a comedic way, and as a parody, and parodies and satire have been an important part of culture for centuries.
Right. The operational definition of drag I've used for a while is performance in the medium of gender, which would encompass wrestling, actually, because it's still a performance in the medium of gender, except the gender tends to be masculine.
Yeah.
But not always, even.
No. No. What?
But are there closing thoughts that any of you have? I mean, I think that sums it up perfectly for me.
Right.
I mean, this is an ongoing conversation. Ask us again in a couple months.
Well, here, interestingly...
I think Charlene is a queen in Brooklyn who's been using the term post-drag for a while.
You need to know Charlene.
Yeah.
To keep this conversation going, actually, so Darren asked us a follow-up... It's not intentionally a follow-up question, but it is a piggyback. That Darren has a friend who does not engage in any drag because she finds drag to be inherently misogynistic.
Right.
And wants us to know if we feel that is part of drag, and if not, how we can explain why drag is not inherently mocking of women.
I mean, again, it depends on what your definition of drag is.
Yeah.
So if your definition of drag is a cis man dressing as a cis woman, sometimes that's going to be misogynistic.
Especially what you see in mainstream culture.
Yeah. I think a lot of people who think that drag is inherently misogynistic or inherently transphobic have just not seen a lot of drag.
I think I have to admit that, like, my drag is a parody of certain stereotypes of women. I don't think I'm misogynistic about it. Maybe I am. Tell me if I'm wrong. But I grew up with a lot of influence from women, and so that's. I think for me, it's for me, it's a practice of understanding where they come from, not knowing what it's like to be a female. And also celebrate. I think it's a celebration too for me. Like, yeah, it's just a celebration.
I think, people who call drag inherently misogynistic or transphobic
aren't looking into it enough,
but are also, like, I find it really sad because that erases the history of women who have done drag, and it erases the history of trans women who have done drag.
Yep.
And I think also, yes, there are parts of drag that are parodic or satirical. Some of it's aspirational.
It also feels very white feminist to me, that ideal.
Yeah. Because it like, drag serves a very different, that's true, like, drag serves a very different function in like a ballroom setting than it does in like a drag race setting even. Like the concept of realness as you see it in a ball is very, very, very different from like the drag you see at like on Drag Race even.
Yeah, I would say that I would never minimize the parts of drag or just queer culture in general that can be very misogynistic and transphobic. Like, certainly it is possible to be exclusionary in those contexts, but I don't think it's inherent in the definition, like you said, especially if you seek out other kinds of drag. Like, there are so many drag offerings that you could go find that are produced by women or by trans people.
Lady Queen.
Yeah, shout out to Lady Queen, which is a
Crimson Kitty,
trans, feminine, non-binary collective of drag artists in New York who are all so talented and so wonderful and so progressive, and we support them nonstop, and I DJ their shows sometimes.
Yeah.
We're forgetting about drag kings.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
You know, like, you don't even get to... That question doesn't even, like, encompass... I mean, I guess the question is pointed at men doing...
Yeah, but I think it's a valid thing to say, like, that, that's an aspect of performance that is women questioning the male power dynamic, and so that's another aspect of drag to look into. But in general, I would say, I mean, like, I don't know, when you turned the question into what your personal drag was, I was like, oh, am I doing misogynistic things in the way that I portray a specific type of woman?
I even think about it in the gestures that I use in performance if I'm doing a song by a black artist, and this isn't gender, but it's connected. Like, am I celebrating or am I parodying? Or is it both? And what does that mean? But I also am coming from this little queer kid growing up in the Midwest. Oh God, I'm getting emotional. The people I looked up to were people like Annie Lennox, Salt and Peppa, Missy Elliott, because they were doing new things, and a lot of it was black artists that I looked up to, and you have to be careful, and especially as a man and a gay man, gay men have to do better.
Yeah.
Because you can't just like, oh, I've been through some shit, like, as a white male gay man, and that's it. You have to continue growing and thinking. I saw this shirt in Chelsea the other day, and it was a black gay man walking down the street, and I mean, his race doesn't have to do anything with it, but it was a shirt that said, "Women ruin my life."
Oh my God.
And I'm like, yeah, we're still here, and your question is valid, and your resistance to drag, not that he wasn't even drag, but like resistance to men doing a female illusion or female inspired drag is valid.
Yeah, and there are some
still thinking in those ways.
Yeah, there are some drag artists who are misogynistic. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I guess that on a theoretical and not personal note, because I don't do drag, I think that there's this wave in contemporary cultural criticism where people think something is either criticizing or celebrating something. And I think a lot of the time, culture is more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And you're doing both at the same time.
Yeah.
Also, comedy is more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Like, it's... Yeah.
I mean, yeah, so much of the reason that a lot of queer men, myself included, start drag is simply because you are, from a young age, grouped in with the girls. Like,
right.
that is this...
Oh, yeah, queer theory was under the umbrella of feminist
Yeah.
studies for a long... I mean, it still is, and probably in some places, I'm sure.
Most places.
I mean, but even in terms of, like, I know in, like, 8th grade, if we went on a school trip and they divided into, like, boys and girls, the first joke thrown out is that, oh, Chris will go sit with the girls.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, same. I always wanted to.
It was I mean, I don't know if it was that I wanted to, but it was like I wasn't one of the boys. Like, I wasn't counted as a male because I was too faggy. And so I think that drag is a way to, like, comment on the way that society perceives gay men.
Right.
And, like, because I don't think as a drag queen I act particularly like a real woman. I act like a really loud gay dude.
Right.
Like, as part of my persona. And I think that a lot of drag queens aren't necessarily impersonating women as much as they are being the loudest, femmiest gay man they know how to be, which is it
allows us to, like, tap into that shit that we got made fun of for, or what we were interested in, and yeah.
And it's not that there aren't problems with that.
Right.
Yeah.
That is, I'm not saying that is
it's complicated. It's complicated.
And I think a lot of drag is also criticisms of the way the world treat women.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you also have to realize, especially for Ariel and I, we grew up in a time where we didn't have people to look up to on television as much as kids do today. And so our icons, and a lot of gay men's icons, are women, and our moms and our aunts and whomever else.
And Bjork.
It's so quiet.
You know, I do also think this conversation is particularly interesting for our wrestling fans because sometimes I think we're the only drag they see.
I really think we should bring Crimson in one day.
Crimson
on a question like this. Kitty,
yeah. And Scholar, I guess.
And Scholar, because we can talk to you all day about how we feel about it, but we're still men performing gender.
It is a gigantic topic.
It's a gigantic topic.
I'd encourage you, if you're interested, to go do other reading about it as well, and not even just don't rely on just what we're saying about it.
No, please don't. But also, if you hear something you like, that's fine.
But we could talk about this literally all day.
Yeah.
We should move on. There's a final question from Clemencia. She writes a really long paragraph that I'm going to boil it down to...
Just read it.
How
long is it?
It's long. It's also long. It's not structured.
No shade.
No structure. Yeah, no. It's she even said, she's like, that's a big question, but, like, basically, how do we feel about family-friendly pride parades? In that pride is a thing that gives children, as they are coming out younger and younger, a chance to experience a really important part of being part of gay culture or queer culture. But also, there are some inherently or implicitly sexual or adult aspects of a lot of pride events. And, question mark. Like, what do we do with all that?
I have a lot of complicated opinions because I'm quite antenatal and quite anti-child.
Yeah, I am quite pro-child and pro... I think we do have to start receiving ourselves as role models, whether you like it or not. And maybe you don't have to do it, but you have to accept that it's something that's happening. And
I feel like questions about the level of appropriateness of queer behavior are implicitly tied to, like, an assimilationist pull.
Yeah, I mean, you as a parent need to decide what's good for your child.
Ultimately, yes.
And you need to, like, have those conversations with your child. That's not my job.
Right.
But I do feel a pull knowing that I have several children in my life and I'm a brand new auntie-uncle. It is important to me to... I don't know. A few months ago, I was like, I don't even want cigarettes in my pictures because, like, kids are watching and, like, cigarettes are bad. But also, that's not my job.
It's not your job, but cigarettes are quite different from, like, the categorization of gay male sexuality being implicitly inappropriate, which is, like, I think a whole other thing that people, like, the kind of salacious in quotes, behavior that you would see at a gay pride parade is deemed salacious because of structures of, like, sexism and heteropatriarchy. And because of that, I am not interested in compromising any of the sleaziness to make, you know, a straight audience, make my lifestyle more palatable to straight people.
I think the answer is, if you feel like it's a problem, create a space for your children.
That is exactly what I was thinking. I think
just
that
like drag queens reading to children.
Like, I'd never go, but I'm so happy it exists.
Yeah, you need to, and it. There's a point where, like, if you feel compelled to, that there's a need for something, then you need to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say I am equally with you, resistant to anything that would change current pride parades or pride events. I think that those are, like, just, I don't think it's appropriate to say, like, well, now that children are coming out younger, we have to neuter the thing that we fought so hard to create in the fucking first place.
Yeah.
I think making spaces where queer children can experience queer childhood in ways that might seporate them from, like,
the other thing they're gonna miss is organizations like if you're gonna miss out on a gay pride parade, you're gonna miss out on the organizations that are still, like, doing other things. And if you're missing out for those sexual reasons, I don't know what to say about that, but then you're also going to miss the, you know, Gays Against Guns or whatever other organizations are still pushing beyond, you know, the sexuality part is, like, I think I agree mostly, like, that we shouldn't censor that, but also, yeah.
I mean, pride parades, though they feature people who are not necessarily wearing a lot of clothing, it is a broad daylight, middle of the day thing. They are not having sex in the streets. Like,
television has all of that. And I've seen straight sex on television since I was 3 years old.
Right, that's part of what I was saying. But it is cool that we live in a world that there are safe spaces for queer children, like DragCon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which I like, which
we'll be at.
Yeah. Yay. But I also hate Pride as a month. I think it's corporate garbage, and the political history of it has been vacated almost completely. So the question of, like, what the appropriateness of Pride Parade to me is almost unimportant, because the whole event is for corporations now. It's not as political as it should be. I think it should be more violent. I think it should be more sexual.
Well, you're also forgetting about, like, that there are events surrounding the
Sure. But, like
I just found out there's a drag march the day before the actual Pride Parade in New York, and it's been going on for so long, and it's still just a bunch of drag queens and whomever getting together and unorganizingly, kind of not as organized and not as corporately sponsored, to just get together and they're marching.
Right.
And I didn't know about that until last year, and I missed it. And, like, that's what I'm going to do
that shit's
this
cool.
year.
But I just have a problem with, like, gays marching with police, or, like, gays for Goldman Sachs, or, like, gays and Monsanto. Like, the whole thing to me is already so deeply compromised that the idea of then having to censor some kind of sexuality on top of that is, like, so repugnant to me.
Yeah.
Yep, so I guess that sums it up. None of us are having children. Oh no, Berica might. But don't leave your children with us is the main takeaway.
You can leave them with Berica.
I'll babysit your children.
Don't leave your children with Berica.
Bring them to a show. I won't even do numbers. You can go do numbers.
To our show.
I'd rather not have a child at our show.
I would love it.
If you bring your child to your show, do not ask me to play censored music, because I will say no.
Oh yeah, that's stupid. Yeah, don't ask the DJ to do anything that you want them to do unless you're tipping them a $20 bill, and even then, don't expect anything.
No one's adjusting themselves for your child anywhere ever. That's like the main takeaway from this question.
Right.
Like, wherever you take your child, you have to be ready for your child
That's
to
your
experience
responsibility.
that moment.
Yeah.
That's your responsibility. Take responsibility for your children, and
which is not to suggest that whoever asked this question,
right? Obviously,
yes, I don't think that you are personally asking the world to adjust to your children if you have them.
Right. I think you were asking a bigger question.
Have those difficult conversations. When the kid asks the question, they're asking it because they're prepared for an answer.
Yeah.
You're not prepared to... If you're not prepared to give them an answer, that's something you need to think about.
I like John Waters' take on this when he talks about schools banning gay books in their libraries, and he's like, look, if your kid's smart enough to know to ask for it, they're smart enough to know what the content is. And I kind of agree.
I mean, I'm not going to give parenting advice.
Yeah.
I don't know how to raise a fucking kid.
But I also, I think that we've built up this conversation, and I see this a lot in a lot of places where we suddenly think conversations about sexuality are difficult. I don't think they're as hard as we pretend they are.
They're not.
And
I have several friends who are parents who have these conversations. Your children, they may not be ready for the whole of it, but they're ready.
Just don't tell them about the whole.
Yeah.
They're not ready for the whole.
Oh God!
But everything surrounding the whole, everything up till the whole, they get.
They can figure out the whole for themselves. Give them the information they need to know about the whole.
Yeah, I would agree. But I also think there's an interesting thing that straight people do that drives me insane, where they, when it comes to queer topics, they categorize the conversations as difficult. And I get very angry about that, where, even if it's something as simple as, hey, can you call that person they? They ask to be called they. And they're like, it's so hard, though, to get used to that. And I'm like, it isn't.
Yeah.
You're going to mess up a few times, and no one's going to be mad at you about that. But it is not hard. And if you keep telling yourself it's hard, that's what makes it hard.
It's an excuse to not try.
I think you bring up an important point that you're going to fuck up.
Yeah, and
I think that's important for queers to hear, and also straight people to hear.
Yeah,
people are gonna fuck up.
Yeah,
let's just be conscious and be forthright and
apologize if you fuck up,
and apologize, and also just it's okay. I mean, it's not always okay, but it's just let's be more passionate with each other, or compassionate. Passionate?
There we go.
Passionate and compassionate.
I feel
I'm usually an advocate for more...
I'm unable to do that.
Oh.
Whoa, Siri.
Siri cannot be more compassionate.
All right, well, everybody but Siri can be compassionate. I feel like we have to close this down before we talk about it forever.
Yeah.
So, unless you're Siri, just be nice to each other. Sounds good, and we'll see you guys soon.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for listening. Bye.